Hello everyone and welcome to this Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer showcase. This 1v1 match, I'm going to be playing the High Elves. And guys, we're going to be facing off against Indie Pride and Milk and Cookies Total War, who's going to be playing the Dark Elves led by Malekith the Witch King. So I think this is actually going to be the first Elvish Grudge match on the channel, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. So for my front line, I do have a very heavy core of the White Lines of Trace. So these guys are definitely pretty solid. You can see they have 90 armor, very good leadership, and on top of that, they have exceptional combat stats. 39 melee attack and 37 melee defense is really good, especially when you compare it to like a Chaos Warriors with great weapons who actually cost more. And I think Chaos Warriors with great weapons have 34 and 34. Granted, they have a little bit more weapon strength, but that's still very good for 800 gold. However, there is a drawback to that kind of a exceptional stat pool there. So they do have this martial prowess. So martial prowess gives them plus 12 melee attack, plus 12 melee defense and plus 2 melee attack when their hit points are greater than 50%. So once they really start to take a beating or take some missile fire, these guys are really going to lose out on pretty much a lot of their strength. And their melee defense is going to go down to 25, making them a lot more squishy. In the middle, I do have the Swordmasters of Hoeth, and these guys are quite elite. You can see they do have just good stats pretty much across the entire board, but they are also very expensive. I think they cost like 1,300, but 90 armor, 88 leadership, and on top of that, they have 48 melee attack, which is so big for a great weapon unit. I think that might be more than Chosen. If you think of Chosen with great weapons, I think they have 44 melee attack, but I'd have to go back and check. But still, these guys also do have some mitigation against missile effects. They have the shielded effect, so very similar to Dwarf Slayers. So Slayers, they spin the axes above their heads, thematically speaking, and deflect missiles. So these guys pretty much do the same thing, and I suppose they chop the arrows out of the sky with their swords. That would actually be really cool if there was an animation for that. Maybe we'll have to check this battle and see if they do. In the back here, I do have the Lore Master of Hoeth, and this is honestly probably my favorite unit on the High Elf roster. This guy is an absolute monster. So, mind you guys, this guy has this like awesome two-handed greatsword, and his stats reflect that. He has 360 weapon strength with really good armor piercing value, so he's really useful in the front line against like armored infantry. And the Dark Elves do have a fair amount of armored infantry. Granted, Indie Pride in the front line has his fodder, so his Dread Spears, which are just rank and file anti-large units. But he does have the Blackguarded Nagron here, who are pretty much the equivalent of the Swordmasters of Hoeth. Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily because they're a halberd unit. I guess the what are these guys called? The Har Ganeth Executioners are more similar to the Swordmasters over here. But nonetheless, the AP from the Lore Master of Hoeth is going to be very useful in the front line. But on top of that, he has awesome spells. So he has Earthblood, he has Weisson's Wildform, which if you overcast is a very powerful kind of AoE buff. And on top of that, he also has Spirit Leech, so he's really going to be able to assist in the Lord dueling and all that kind of good stuff. So that's pretty much my entire front line. Just kind of in summary, I think one of the big drawbacks of the High Elf front line is that if they take a lot of artillery fire, like from the Skaven or any other, the Goblobber from the Dwarves before the fighting starts, you're going to lose out on so much of your effectiveness. But nonetheless, they do have very good starting stats. I do have a Prince on the Star Dragon right here who is very powerful. So the Star Dragon is actually the most powerful dragon in the game. And you can see his stats also reflect that. 64, 58, and 580 for his stats respectively. And it looks like Malekith is 54, 52, and 520. So just a true testament to how powerful the Star Dragon is. So, and a Prince is essentially the same as like a General of the Empire or let's say a male Glade Lord for the Wood Elves. But yeah, pretty good duelist, and the Star Dragon does have that fire breathing, so that's always fun. And these guys, you guys have probably been seeing a lot of these YouTubers putting up battles, and the High Elves definitely, feel and look a lot weaker than other factions, but I think these are one of the recipes for success. These are the Flame Spire Phoenixes. So these guys are extremely fast. You can see they have 120 move speed, which is insane. And on top of that, they have really good combat stats. 40 melee attack isn't the highest, but they have 330 weapon strength on top of 120 speed, on top of fear and terror. So these guys can literally fly around, cause terror just all over the battlefield. And they also do have gyrocopter bombs. So you guys will hopefully get a chance to see that over the course of the battle. And they have 10 charges, if I'm not mistaken. So that's pretty much it for my army. I did do some Bhangarh Deployment. In the forest, I do have the Illyrian Reavers, who are basically just a 600 gold. Very similar to like Mounted Yeoman, just kind of a same old shtick, but they do get that martial prowess, so their melee defense is a little bit better than Yeoman. And on the other side, I have one more Vanguard. So I was expecting Indie Pride to have like some Dark Shards or some maybe like or what is it called, the Reaper Bolt Thrower? I think that's the one for the Dark Elves. I was expecting him to have that, but he didn't have any of that. He just brought a massive melee core of heavy infantry, and it was definitely looking scary. But I do have a very good armor piercing core. These White Lines are going to tear apart those Dread Spears because the Dread Spears don't really have the AP to kind of handle these guys. So without further ado, guys, let the games begin. So Indie Pride does have Malekith with the Lore of Darkness. He has 2 Cold One Knights here who are very good anti-large armor piercing, and even though they're meant against large, if he's able to surround my Prince or get onto my White Lines from the flank, that armor piercing is going to be very useful. And you can see I'm dropping bombs right now, or actually no, that was the Dragon Breath. So that was one Dragon Breath, guys, right on these Harn Ganeth Executioners, and it did a ton of damage. So in the front line, the White Lines and the Swordmasters are going to collapse with these Dread Spears, and man, these guys look pretty darn cool. But it's really going to be a massacre for the Dread Spears. They're going to get cut up pretty bad and will probably do barely any damage. So in the meantime, I'm sending my Flying Goon Squad, and I feel like this is like the Flying Goon Squad 2.0. Like, remember how the Empire used to use like generals of the Empire and Empire captains to like chase enemy lords out of the skies. This is the next evolution of that. So in the front, the Swordmasters are going to be fighting, and they're going to do very well. You can see they're just cutting these Dread Spears to pieces, because not only do they hit pretty hard with their weapon strength, but they also have a very, very good like bonus versus infantry. And you can see my Star Dragon coming down here. So this is definitely nice. The Phoenixes are like screening up in the sky and keeping Malekith at bay, and essentially allowing my Star Dragon to do as he pleases. And you see those bombs right there? Those are the Phoenix bombs. So I missed that one pretty horribly. I'm still getting used to it. But it did some really good damage to those Black Guard right there, which is pretty solid. And I also dropped some bombs here, which did massive damage to the Bleak Swords and the Dread Spears. It seems to do more damage against some of the lightly armored troops. So you can see my Star Dragon coming in hot over here. It's definitely going to do some nice splash damage, and you can see those Bleak Swords are going to get sent flying. And they don't have immunity to psychology, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and see if some of the elite Dark Elf troops do. So the Black Guard here, they do have it, and yeah, why can't they just give Chosen that? Man, I really wish they would. So in the back, I pulled in my Illyrian Reavers. So basically, oh no, I thought these were my Illyrian Reavers. They're actually in the forest, because that's actually a bit of a spoiler, guys. That's what's coming next. My Illyrian Reavers are coming from the flank. But unfortunately, I do land my Prince over here, and Indy Pride reacts very well. So he actually surrounds it with his Black Guard and his Cold Ones, all of whom have anti-large and armor piercing. So I'm taking a huge beating. Granted, my Swordmaster of Hoth is going to pop Earthblood on me and, you know, give me a little bit of sustainability there, so that was a big save. Unfortunately for me, you can see the Murderous Prowess has been procced, so Indy Pride for 90 seconds is going to get a faction-wide buff that gives him a ton of stats. So this is really kind of the danger zone for me. But my two Phoenixes are chasing Malekith out of the sky, and he has 90 speed against their 120, so they can pretty much always chase him and make contact, which is great. So I decided to send these two troops after Malekith, and right now I just wanted to do some bombing runs, so I dropped some bombs there, and it does some pretty good damage. I'm able to clip those Cold Ones a little bit. And now my Illyrian Reavers are coming out. So since I didn't really have any good targets to take out like missiles or things like that, I basically just did rear charges and tried to like pick up the scrap. So you can see here, my Reavers are going to jump into Spearmen, which normally is like a pretty horrible engagement, but the Spearmen were facing the opposite direction. So I think getting on the side avoided their bracing, and they're very low. So basically I just wanted to, you know, clean them off the battlefield and, you know, try and get the value out of that, you know, out of that methodology there. So over here, the White Lines are putting up a pretty good fight. They're in a 2v1 situation. So they're surrounded by the Black Guard as well as these Bleak Swords here. And, you know, they're still doing pretty well. 104 kills, and they actually trade really efficiently with the Black Guard. Man, so many tongue twisters, like learning all the names of these new units. It's like my mind's all over the place. But the Black Guard are a halberd unit. So they are good at melee, and I definitely recommend using them in the front line in some engagements, and even in this one. But they are going to trade relatively inefficiently in terms of just a pure cost analysis against the White Lines of Trace here. So 122 kills is pretty solid. And you can see my Illyrian Reavers coming in and getting a nice little charge. And also my Star Dragon breathing some pretty solid fire down here on these Cold Ones, who did take a bit of damage. But I definitely have to be very cautious with my landing. So if Malekith, what he might want to do in this situation is like land right on top of his Black Guard. Like if he landed and fought right here against my Reavers and White Lines, if I went to follow, he could then support with some of his Cold Ones and other things like that. And you can see Malekith uses a really nice cone ability. So very well played by Indy Pride. My Lore Master of Hoth down here on the ground. He's using Spirit Leech on Malekith, still trying to work him down, but Malekith is very durable, and he does have Soul Stealer, so he can actually heal pretty well. But he does land here, and you can see my Phoenixes are hot in pursuit, and my Swordmaster of Hoth back here definitely looks like one of those guys from the beginning of the first Lord of the Rings movie on Mount Doom. Very cool. He's going to charge in there. He has 21 kills to his name, but you know, not the most, but still, it's having that presence in the front line versus these very elite guard of Black Guard and Nagron is good. And if those 21 kills are on these units, it's definitely worth it. So you can see over here on the far side, Malekith is having a bit of a cockfight with these birds over here. They're just sitting there pecking away at him, and it's probably not a fun engagement for him, but you know, Malekith is quite a duelist. I mean, and what really makes him a good duelist is his magic. I mean, Soul Stealer is so good. It does very high single target DPS and also heals him, and he also has Doom Bolt if he wants to use it. I'm not sure if Indy Pride bought it, but perhaps we'll check here in a minute. But yeah, the fight's underway. You can see that these Flamesfire Phoenixes are getting a pretty good surround on Malekith, doing some decent HP damage, and I do have Earthblood to support them, so I'm getting that perpetual healing. But unfortunately, for Indy Pride, my Star Dragon is going to be engaging right now, and it gets a great rear charge on Malekith, and he's taking some pretty big damage right here, taking about 1,000 HP damage right there in a matter of seconds, so that was definitely very, very tough for him. So he's going to be retreating right there and kind of scurrying off the battlefield. Maybe, I'm not sure if he's broken. No, he's actually still steady despite all that, which is pretty impressive. Down here in the pits, you can see my Swordmasters are having a very, very vengeful fight here with their evil brothers, and it looks like the Cold Ones are also charging in here. So very well played by Indy Pride, you know, just throwing those guys into the mesh, and they're also doing very good against my Illyrian Reavers, who are taking a lot of damage. I really wanted to take out his like artillery and different things like that with my Reavers, but man, there was no good targets. So these Cold Ones are getting a pretty good engagement, and I think he's actually able to break some of my troops here. Yeah, I don't have much fighting. The Swordmasters of Hoth, however, just MVPs, 151 kills. So, you know, they are very expensive at 1,300. And again, I probably wouldn't bring them against factions that are really punishing with artillery, but against the Dark Elves, you know, they're going to be pretty good because they do have that shielded effect. So they can mitigate the crossbows from the Dark Shards, and they can really kind of outclass a lot of the, you know, the Dark Elf infantry. So my Star Dragon is able to land in here and do some pretty good work against these guys, and you can see there's some routing going on. In the meantime, Malekith is up in the sky, just kind of flying circles, and my Phoenixes are chasing him down pretty well with that 120 speed. Those things are so ridiculous, and you know, I apologize ahead of time, guys, because I'm sure in the replay, you guys are. I actually play when I cast the replays, I don't have the sound on, like the sound's off, so I don't hear the sounds of the birds squawking. But I'm sure you're just non-stop hearing those birds squawking like while I bat them around the battlefield. That's probably so annoying. But anyways, my Dragon's going to come back in the air and join the Phoenixes, and they're going to chase Malekith down pretty good, and hopefully a nice little goon squad. But down here we have the kind of the final battle. So the remnants of Indy Pride's forces are fighting. You can see this Lore Master of Hoth just stands alone in the darkness and is just laying a massive beating on these guys. Some of these Illyrian Reavers coming in, and you know, when the battle's this close, even these like, you know, cheap kind of skirmisher cav, when they charge into the back of the unit, it's going to take away at least 14 leadership from them due to a rear charge penalty. So I mean, it all adds up, you know. So these black guards right here are kind of fighting my Star Dragon, which is a very bad matchup, but I figured it was close enough and the balance of power was in my favor that I could just kind of force it and try and, you know, put a fork in this game. But Indy Pride is on the prowl. You can see he has Malekith, and Malekith does have a great angle right now. My Dragon is very vulnerable, so he actually charges in there and gets a great little charge, does about 600 HP damage, and his black guard are also surrounding me, so it's a very dicey situation. But thankfully Malekith is quite low as well. But the big thing going for me is I have my Lore Master of Hoth. So even if I lost all of these troops, this Lore Master of Hoth would still be very tough to kill. Like, he would put up a pretty good fight against, you know, what's left of Malekith's health. You can also see that nice AoE blast coming from Malekith there that's able to kind of, you know, break some of my Knights of White lines right there. But unfortunately, it was too little too late there. But yeah, it was an incredibly good battle. So guys, I really think, you know, what movie is that from? If you guys could remind me, you know, where he's like, I've cracked the code. But it totally applies to this situation. You can see that the Phoenix is right here in conjunction with the Prince. We're able to, you know, really pressure in the air aggressively. And, you know, in order to counteract, like, the White Lines of Trace and the Sword Masters of Hoth, you're going to need some AP, like, you know, these Harganeth Executioners. Man, so many confusing names I have to learn. But, you know, and the Phoenixes do really well with their bombs. And they also have great AP damage and high mobility. They cause fear and terror. So they just have so much kind of, you know, so many dual purposes there, which I think is pretty good. I think the Prince is a good pick on the Star Dragon. The Star Dragon is pretty fearsome, and I mean, there's few monstrous units that can really, you know, stand and fight with it. I mean, I do think Krokar could beat it, because Krokar, when you put him on the Carnosaur, Grimlock does have a, you know, heavy anti-large bonus. So I think that would be a good, you know, matchup there. But I definitely think it's a decent option. I don't know if it's going to be super competitive, but nonetheless, I do think the Dragon and some of these Phoenixes and the other units that the High Elves have are going to be, you know, useful in the metagame. But yeah, the white lines seem cost effective. Granted, like I mentioned before, if you're fighting against like Skaven or Dwarves or some other faction that's going to bring like the Hammer of the Witches and really, you know, punish those guys before they get to you, they're going to just be so ineffective when they arrive. So you definitely got to bounce a little bit. High Elves are in a bit of a tricky place. Like, I'm trying to think if you want to use them as like almost like a chaos faction. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but in the front line, to use a bunch of white lines and infantry and just like use flanking cav and just kind of ignore their missile units. Their archers are good, but I don't know. It's just feels like they're in a bit of a weird place, but they might just be one of those factions that's a little bit harder to figure out in multiplayer, and I think people will crack the code as time goes on. So thanks again for watching this game, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Very well played to my opponent, Indy Pride. Looking forward to our next battles, and guys, I got a lot more content coming soon.